The space station was bustling with activity. Ships from all across the galaxy docked to deliver goods, supplies, and information. Humans, aliens, and all kinds of creatures moved about, exchanging resources, knowledge, and stories. It was one of the busiest stations in the sector. Everyone had a role to play. Max, a human engineer, had been working on the station for several months. His job was to make sure the station's systems were running smoothly, from the air filtration units to the power generators. He enjoyed his work, but sometimes the long shifts left him feeling disconnected from the people around him. He had grown used to working alone, away from the noisy crowds and strange languages of the station's inhabitants. One morning, as Max was walking to the control room, he noticed a new face among the station's workers. She was an alien woman, tall and graceful, with smooth, pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Her eyes were a deep, mesmerizing shade of purple, and her long silver hair flowed down her back in soft waves. She wore a simple, fitted suit of deep teal, different from the usual uniforms the station's crew wore. Max couldn't help but stare. He had seen many different species on the station before, but there was something about this woman that caught his attention. She moved with an elegance that seemed out of place in the busy, mechanical environment. Her name, he would soon learn, was Zero. Zero was new to the station, assigned to help oversee the maintenance of some of the more delicate systems. She had traveled a long way from her home planet, a place far from Earth. It's known for its advanced technology and ancient traditions. She was well-educated, intelligent, and had a deep understanding of intergalactic relations, but she was also quiet and reserved, often keeping to herself. At first, Max wasn't sure how to approach her. His social skills weren't the best, and he wasn't used to talking to aliens, especially not ones who seemed as mysterious and captivating as Zira. But one day, as he was working on a faulty conduit in the control room, he found himself in need of assistance. Without thinking, he turned to Zira, who was nearby, calibrating some equipment. "Hey," Zira Max called out, his voice sounding a bit nervous. "Could you give me a hand with this? Not sure what's wrong with this system?" Zira looked up from her work, her purple eyes meeting his. There was a brief moment of silence before she nodded and walked over to him. "Of course, Max. Let me take a look." She moved with surprising speed and precision, her fingers dancing over the control panel as she quickly assessed the problem. Max watched her work, impressed by how easily she understood the system. She seemed to know exactly what needed to be done. Within minutes, she had fixed the problem, and the system hummed back to life. Max let out a sigh of relief. "Wow, you make it look easy." Zira gave him a small, knowing smile. "I've been trained in systems like this before. It's just a matter of understanding the basics." Max grinned, feeling more at ease. "I could definitely use a bit more of that training." For the next few hours, they worked together, fixing various systems around the station. Max found himself enjoying her company, though he still couldn't quite put his finger on what made her so intriguing. It wasn't just her beauty, though she certainly was striking. There was something else, something in the way she carried herself, composed and thoughtful. As the workday came to an end, Max and Zira found themselves in the break room, grabbing a drink before heading home. The room was quiet, with only a few other workers taking a break. Max sat down at one of the tables, gesturing for Zira to join him. "So what brings you to this station?" Max asked, trying to break the silence. Zira took a seat across from him, her eyes focused on her drink for a moment before she spoke. "I was assigned here by the Intergalactic Council. I'm here to help with the maintenance of the station's communication systems. It's a temporary assignment, just for a few months." Max nodded, intrigued. "Sounds like important work." "Is?" she replied. "The communication systems here are crucial for maintaining peace and order in this sector. If something goes wrong, it could disrupt trade and alliances between different species." Max's curiosity grew. "So you're like a diplomat of sorts?" Zira chuckled softly. "I suppose you could say that. People are known for their diplomacy. We've learned that maintaining peace is far more valuable than war." Max leaned back in his chair, thinking about her words. I've always wondered what it would be like to live on a planet where everyone gets along. I mean, Earth's not exactly the most peaceful place. Zira's smile softened. No place is perfect. But we try our best to understand each other and work together. It's the only way to survive in a galaxy as vast and diverse as this one. Max was about to say something when the door to the break room opened, and a group of station workers walked in, laughing and joking. Zira stood up, her face becoming more serious. "It looks like my break is over," she said, her voice now colder than before. Max stood as well, sensing that the moment was ending. "I'll see you around, Zira." Zira nodded, her smile returning for just a moment. "Yes, Max. I'll see you soon." As she walked out of the break room, Max couldn't help but watch her go. There was something about her that left him wanting to know more. Little did he know, that simple touch of hands, that brief but significant connection, would change everything. The days after Zira and Max had worked together on the control systems felt strange. Max couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. Every time he saw Zira, there was an unspoken connection that lingered in the air. They spoke more often, sharing stories of their worlds, their hopes, and dreams. Yet, Max didn't fully understand what was happening. It felt like an ordinary friendship, but there was something deeper, something he couldn't quite grasp. Zira, too, found herself thinking about Max more than she expected. She had traveled far across the galaxy, to a station full of unfamiliar faces and cultures. But Max was different. It wasn't like the other humans she had encountered, distant and cold. Instead, he was warm, curious, and kind. Despite her attempts to keep her emotions in check, she couldn't ignore how she felt when she was around him. One evening, after a long day of work, Zira felt unwell. It started as a slight dizziness, followed by a strange, uncomfortable sensation in her stomach. She tried to ignore it at first, chalking it up to exhaustion. After all, it had been a long trip to the station, and the adjustment to a new environment was never easy. But when the symptoms worsened, she knew something was wrong. Zira's first instinct was to seek out the station's physician. She had heard about the human medical practices and how their healing technology was advanced, though not always as sophisticated as what her people used. Still, she trusted it enough to get checked out. The physician, Dr. Elsie, was an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She had seen many strange ailments over her years of service on the station, but nothing like the symptoms Zira was displaying. "You've been feeling nauseous, dizzy, and weak, right?" Dr. Elsie asked, examining Zira's records. Zira nodded, her silver hair falling over her shoulders as she sat in the sterile examination room. "Yes, but it's more than that. It feels unnatural." Dr. Elsie frowned, tapping on her medical tablet. "Let's run some tests. We need to be sure." "About what we're dealing with," Zira agreed, although a sense of unease settled in her chest. She couldn't explain why, but deep down, she feared something was terribly wrong. After several hours of waiting, the results finally came in. Dr. Elsie called Zira back into her office. The look on the physician's face was serious, and that made Zira's heart race. "Zira, I don't know how to say this, but I've found something unusual in your test results," Dr. Elsie said. "You've contracted a disease, a kind of infection that I've never seen before. It's something that can only be transmitted through physical contact, particularly with humans." Zira's eyes widened in shock. "What? How is that possible?" Dr. Elsie sighed. "It's a rare and dangerous infection that humans can carry without knowing. It's passed through close contact, and it can affect different species in unpredictable ways. Most species who have come into contact with humans haven't been affected, but it seems you're vulnerable to it." Zira's thoughts raced. "I don't understand. I've been careful. I haven't had any unusual interactions with humans." Dr. Elsie nodded slowly. "It doesn't take much. A brief touch, even just shaking hands, can be enough to pass it along. You've been in close contact with a human recently, haven't you?" Zira hesitated for a moment, then remembered the time she had spent working with Max. They had spent hours together, working side by side, sharing moments of laughter and quiet conversations. She had touched his arm to point something out on a monitor, and there had been a lingering touch when they exchanged tools. It all seemed so harmless. "Yes," Zero said quietly, looking down at her hands. "Max, he was the one I've been working with."
Art!
Dr. Elsie looked at her with concern. "Zira, we need to act fast. This infection can cause severe damage to your system if left untreated, and there's no known cure for it yet. But we'll try everything we can to stabilize you. For now, rest, and let's keep monitoring your condition closely." Zero stood up, feeling numb. She had never been one to panic, but this was different. How could she have been so careless? She had just touched Max, and now she was paying the price. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than a simple accident. Later that evening, Zira sat alone in her quarters, staring at the station's vast view of the stars. The weight of her diagnosis settled on her chest like a heavy burden. She had always prided herself on her ability to handle any situation. But this was different. This wasn't just about her health. It was about the consequences of her actions. The trust she had built with Max, and the bond that had formed between them. Max, meanwhile, had no idea what was happening. He was still caught up in his work, unaware of the terrible consequences that had followed their simple interactions. But Zira knew the truth now. Her contact with him had triggered something inside her, something that had led to this deadly infection. A part of her wanted to tell Max immediately, to warn him of the danger, but she didn't want to risk causing a panic. What if the infection spread to other species? What if Max became involved in something far bigger than either of them had anticipated? In the silence of her room, Zira made a vow to herself. She would find a way to fix this. She couldn't let the infection define her. She couldn't let Max or anyone else suffer because of something as simple as a touch. But where could she start? How much time did she have left? The news of Zira's illness weighed heavily on her mind. She had always considered herself strong, both physically and mentally, but now, faced with this unknown disease, she was vulnerable. She had to find a way to stop it before it got worse. Her people's technology could heal many things, but there was no cure for this. It was unlike anything her species had encountered before, and the knowledge of human biology was limited on her home planet. The situation seemed impossible, but Zira refused to accept defeat. Max noticed the change in her demeanor over the next few days. She seemed quieter, more distant. Whenever they worked together, there was a new tension in the air, a quiet sadness in her eyes that Max couldn't quite explain. He had known Zira long enough to understand that something was wrong, but he didn't know what. He hesitated to ask, fearing that whatever it was might make things worse. One afternoon, while they were working together in the control room, Zira suddenly stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. Her usual calm was gone, replaced by an urgency he hadn't seen before. "Max, I need your help," she said, her voice more serious than he'd ever heard it. "There's something happening to me, and I think I need to find a cure." Max was taken aback. "What's going on, Zira? You've been acting strange lately. What's wrong?" Zira glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "I've been infected with a disease, a kind of STD, that can only be passed through physical contact with humans. It's rare, and there's no known cure for it, but I think it's getting worse." Max's eyes widened in shock. He had no idea that anything like this was even possible. "You're telling me that you got sick because of me?" Zero nodded. "Yes, and I need to find a cure. The disease is spreading, and if it's not stopped soon, it could be fatal. I don't know how much time I have left." Max felt a lump form in his throat. "I had no idea. I never meant for this to happen." "I know," Zero said softly. "None of this was your fault. But I can't sit here and do nothing. I need to get to the bottom of this, and I need your help." Max didn't hesitate. "Of course I'll do whatever I can. We'll find a way to fix this." Zira's eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you. I need to find a place where I can search for answers. There's a planet far from here, known for its ancient knowledge and healing methods. If anyone can help, it's there." Max didn't think twice. "Then that's where we'll go." They left the space station in a small shuttle with only the bare necessities for their journey. As they approached the unknown planet, Zira explained more about its history. It was an ancient world, untouched by war and conflict for centuries. Its people had mastered many things, including medicine and healing, and they possessed knowledge of alien diseases that most species never even heard of. The planet's surface was a mix of lush forests and towering mountains. The air smelled fresh and pure, and Max couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as they landed in a secluded area, away from any other settlements. Zira led the way, her steps light and purposeful as she guided Max through the dense forest. Hours later, they arrived at a hidden temple, ancient and weathered, with large stone doors that had clearly stood for centuries. Zira approached the entrance and placed her hand on the door, speaking a few words in her native language. To Max's surprise, the stone doors slowly opened, revealing an inner sanctum filled with books and scrolls. The air inside was thick with the smell of old parchment and incense. "This is the place," Zira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This temple holds the knowledge of generations, all of it passed down from those who first discovered the healing arts. If anyone can help me, it's here." Max followed her into the temple, his eyes wide with wonder. "This place. It's incredible." Zira nodded, her gaze sweeping over the shelves filled with ancient texts. "It is, but we don't have much time. We need to find something that will tell us how to stop the infection." For hours, they searched through the scrolls and books, reading ancient texts in languages that Max could barely understand. Zira, however, had a gift for languages and was able to decipher the complicated texts. Slowly, they pieced together a pattern, a possible cure hidden deep within the temple's records. After what felt like an eternity, Zira found what she had been searching for. An old manuscript, nearly falling apart with age, held the answer. It was a rare and complicated procedure, one that required both human and alien blood, mixed in a special way. The text described how certain diseases could be neutralized by a unique combination of biology and energy, but the procedure was dangerous. If not done correctly, it could make the disease worse, rather than cure it. Zira looked up from the manuscript, her expression both hopeful and fearful. "This is it, Max. This is the only chance I have." Max stared at the page, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "Are you sure about this? It sounds risky." Zira nodded. "There's no other choice. I've already come this far." Max thought for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Then let's do it. I'll be with you every step of the way." Smiled, her gratitude shining through despite the fear in her eyes. "Thank you, Max. I couldn't do this without you." As they prepared for the procedure, Max realized how much he had come to care for Zira. Despite the challenges they faced, there was something about her that made him want to fight for her, to protect her. Whatever the future held, he was ready to face it with her by his side. Max and Zira had gathered everything they needed for the procedure. They had spent days preparing and studying the ancient manuscript, ensuring that they understood every detail. The cure was risky, requiring delicate precision and a mixture of human and alien blood. If they failed, it could make the disease worse. But Zira had no other choice. Time was running out, and this was her only hope. They returned to the hidden temple, a quiet place far away from the rest of the galaxies. Noise and danger. Max was nervous, but he didn't let it show. Zira's health had been deteriorating, her strength was fading, and her once steady hands now trembled slightly. She had no time to waste. This was her last chance. As they set up the necessary equipment, Max could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on them. Zira had trusted him completely, and he wasn't about to let her down. He was determined to help her no matter what. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Max asked, his voice filled with concern. "There's still a risk, Zira. You don't have to do this." Zira looked up at him, her purple eyes filled with both gratitude and fear. "I have to, Max. There's no other way. I've already lost so much. I can't lose any more." Max nodded, understanding. He would do anything to save her, even if it meant risking everything. As they began the procedure, something strange happened. The energy in the room seemed to shift. Temperature dropped, and the faint glow of the temple's ancient stones flickered. Max tried to focus on the task at hand, but his unease grew with every passing second. Zero placed her hand on the ancient altar, and Max did the same. They were about to begin the delicate procedure when they heard the sound of footsteps behind them. It was faint at first, but it grew louder. Someone was approaching. Before they could react, a group of armed mercenaries burst into the temple. Max and Zero were caught off guard, and in an instant they were surrounded. The mercenaries were heavily armed and moved with a practiced efficiency that made it clear they had been waiting for this moment. "Zero, you have to come with us," one of the mercenaries said, his voice cold and threatening. "You've been marked. The faction doesn't take kindly to traitors." Max's heart sank as he realized what was happening. The mercenaries weren't here for Zira's safety. They were here to capture her. They had known about her plan all along and had been tracking her every move. The rogue faction that had created the disease wanted to stop her from finding the cure. They didn't want Zira to succeed. "No," Zira shouted, her voice fierce. "I won't go with you. I won't be your pawn any longer." Max stepped forward, trying to protect her. "Leave her alone. You don't have to do this. We're not your enemies." But the mercenaries weren't listening. They moved in closer, weapons drawn. 0-0. Max were outnumbered, and there was no way they could fight their way out of this. The leader of the mercenaries, a tall alien with sharp silver eyes, stepped forward. "You don't understand, human. You're nothing but a distraction. Zero was meant to help us bring the galaxy to its knees. Now she's betrayed us. She will pay the price." Zira's face hardened. "I never agreed to your plan." "Manipulated me. I was only trying to save lives." The mercenary leader laughed. "You think you can stop us? You've already made your mistake. Now you'll pay the price." Max looked at Zira, who was standing tall despite the danger. He couldn't let them take her. He had to do something, anything, to protect her. But he knew it was too late. He had no escape. "No way out. I won't let you take her," Max said, his voice shaking with determination. "I won't let you destroy everything we've worked for." But just as the mercenaries advanced, a loud explosion rocked the temple. The mercenaries staggered back, caught off guard by the blast, and the confusion. Zira and Max managed to break free from their attackers. They didn't have much time. This was their chance. Max grabbed Zira's hand and pulled her toward the back of the temple, where a hidden escape route had been marked in the ancient texts. The mercenaries quickly regained their composure and started chasing them. But Max and Zira were faster. They sprinted down the narrow corridors of the temple, hoping they could reach the shuttle before it was too late. The blast had given them a small window of opportunity, but they knew it wouldn't last long. The mercenaries would be right behind them. They reached the shuttle, and Max quickly powered it up, hoping it was still functional after the long journey. "Hold on, Zira," Max shouted as the engines roared to life. The shuttle lifted off, soaring into the sky, narrowly avoiding another explosion from the mercenaries' pursuit as they ascended into space. Zira looked at Max, her expression a mix of relief and regret. "I never wanted this, Max. I never wanted to put you in danger." Max turned to her, his face filled with determination. "I don't care about the danger. I care about you. We'll figure this out together." But as the shuttle left the planet's atmosphere and entered the vast emptiness of space, Max knew that their journey was far from over. The mercenaries would stop at nothing to capture Zira, and their enemies in the rogue faction would do anything to ensure the disease was never stopped. This wasn't just about saving Zira anymore. It was about saving the galaxy. Max and Zira raced through the vast stretches of space, the stars surrounding them like distant lights in the darkness. The shuttle hummed quietly as it glided away from the hidden planet. The dangerous mercenaries in pursuit. Zira was exhausted, her condition still deteriorating, but the fear of capture pushed her forward. They couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close to a cure. Zira sat in the co-pilot seat, her hand resting weakly on the control panel. She could feel the weight of the decision she had made, the stakes so high that it felt like the entire galaxy was watching. "Max, I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "I never meant for this to happen. I dragged you into something you weren't prepared for. Max glanced over at her, his face serious. You didn't drag me into anything. I chose to help you, and I'll keep helping you until this is over. Zira smiled faintly, grateful for his words. She knew that Max wasn't just helping her because he felt obligated. There was something more. But now wasn't the time for emotions. They had to focus on what came next. The mercenaries were still after them, and they needed to figure out a way to stop them before the disease took everything from Zira. I've been thinking, Zira continued, about the next step. We can't just run forever. We need to find the people responsible for this disease, the ones who want to see me fail. You're not going to stop until they get what they want. Max nodded. So we find them first, and stop them before they can hurt anyone else. Zira turned her head toward him, her expression determined. Exactly. I'm not going to let them destroy everything we've worked for. I'm going to finish this, Max, with or without their help. Max clenched his jaw. He understood her resolve, but he also understood the danger they were facing. The rogue faction had vast resources, and their reach stretched far across the galaxy. But Zira wasn't backing down, and neither was he. They set a course for a distant sector known for being a neutral ground in galactic politics. It was a place where allies and enemies alike gathered for quiet negotiations and secret deals. Zira believed they might find an ally. There's someone who could help them expose the rogue faction and stop the disease before it spread further. After hours of travel, they arrived at the designated location. The space station they were heading toward was a massive structure, floating in the middle of a bustling star system. The station was known for its mysterious inhabitants, aliens from all corners of the galaxy, each with their own agenda. Stay sharp, Max warned, as they approached the station. This is a risky move. We don't know who we can trust here. Zira nodded, her mind focused. We'll make it work. Don't have any other choice. They docked their shuttle and made their way into the station. The interior was filled with a constant hum of activity, alien merchants, travelers, and officials moving through the halls, discussing everything from trade deals to covert operations. Zira led Max through the crowded corridors, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of trouble. They finally reached a secluded area of the station, where a figure waited in the shadows. The person was cloaked, but Zira could tell it was a woman by the way she carried herself. Her presence was quiet, almost predatory, but there was something about her that made Zira feel an odd sense of comfort. You're late, the woman said, her voice low and smooth. I was beginning to think you wouldn't show. Zira stepped forward, her posture tense. I'm here, and I need your help. The woman glanced at Max, then back at Zira. I don't help just anyone. It makes you think I'll help you? I have information, Zira said, her voice firm. Information about the disease that's spreading across the galaxy. The one the rogue faction has created. I need to stop it. And I need your help to do it. The woman studied her for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. Finally she spoke. You're more than just a victim, aren't you? You're a threat, a dangerous one. Zira didn't flinch. If I'm dangerous, it's because of what I know, what I can do to stop them. The woman smiled, a slight knowing grin. I like that, but I'll need something in return. Information. A favor, something that'll keep me from getting into trouble. Zira looked at Max, who stood by quietly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. We can make a deal, Zira said.
Ow.
But only if you help us first. The woman leaned back against the wall, thinking for a moment. Right, she said, nodding slowly. I'll help you. But understand this, once we do this, there's no turning back. The faction will come after you. They won't stop until they've crushed you. Zira's heart raced. This was at the moment they would either succeed or fail. She looked at Max, who nodded in agreement. They had no choice but to move forward. Disease had to be stopped, no matter the cost. We're ready, Max said, his voice steady. Let's finish this. The woman's smile widened. Let's make sure they regret underestimating you. As the three of them began to plan their next move, Zira felt a surge of hope. The path ahead was still dangerous, and the odds were stacked against them. But for the first time since she had fallen ill, she felt like she wasn't alone in the fight. She had allies, now people who would stand by her, would help her bring down the rogue faction and stop the disease from claiming more lives. They had no way of knowing how this would end. But Zira knew one thing for certain. They were going to fight. They would fight until the very end. Zira stood before the large illuminated screen in the command center of the station, watching as the data streamed in. The information they had gathered from the mysterious woman was crucial. It detailed the rogue faction's operations, their weaknesses, and their plans to continue spreading the disease. With this knowledge, Zero and Max now had the power to stop them. Max stood beside her, his eyes scanning the screen as well. He could see the determination in Zira's face. She had been fighting for so long. Not just for her survival, but for the survival of countless others. He admired her strength, but he also knew how much she had sacrificed. The disease had taken a toll on her, both physically and emotionally, but she was still standing. "Is this really it?" Max asked quietly. "Is this how we end it?" Zira didn't answer immediately. She simply watched the screen, her mind processing the next steps. The rogue faction had been manipulating the galaxy for far too long, spreading chaos and fear. It was time to expose them, to tear down the system they had built. But that would come with a cost. It always did. "We still have work to do," Zira said, her voice steady. "But this is the first real chance we've had to stop them." Max nodded, his heart pounding. He had never imagined his life would take such a dramatic turn. What started as a simple assignment on a space station had turned into a fight for the galaxy's future. And now, he was fully committed to the cause. He would stand by Zira no matter what. "I'm with you, Zira," Max said, his words clear. "All the way." Zira glanced at him, her purple eyes softening. "Thank you, Max. You've been my strength when I thought I couldn't keep going. I couldn't have done this without you." Max gave her a small, reassuring smile. He wanted to tell her that she didn't need to thank him, that she had done more than anyone could ask for. But he simply nodded, not trusting his voice to say everything he felt. He had always been a man of action, not words. As the hours passed, they planned their next move. The rogue faction's main base was well hidden, located on a distant moon. In a remote star system was a fortress, guarded by the most advanced security systems and well-trained mercenaries. But with the information they now had, Zira and Max had a chance to infiltrate it. The woman who had helped them, an ally Zira had once trusted, was a valuable resource. She had given them access to a powerful hacker who could disable the security systems, allowing them to slip past undetected. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had. Max looked at the map on the screen, his finger tracing the route they would take. "If we do this, there's no going back. The faction will know we're coming, and they'll do everything they can to stop us." Zira's face was grim. "I know, but we have to do this. Can't wait any longer. Too many lives are at stake." They packed what they needed and boarded the shuttle, ready to face whatever came next. The journey to the moon was quiet, both of them lost in their thoughts. Zira was still weak from the disease, but she had regained some of her strength over the past few days. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Max kept an eye on her, watching for any signs of trouble, but he knew she was determined to see this through. She was stronger than anyone he had ever known. As they approached the moon, the tension in the shuttle grew. Zira's hands were steady. On the controls, her focus sharp. Max was silent beside her, knowing that they had only one shot at this. They couldn't afford to fail. The shuttle slipped into the moon's atmosphere, and soon they were in sight of the faction's base. It was everything Zero had feared: massive, heavily guarded, and almost impossible to breach. But the hacker had worked her magic, and the security systems were down. This was their moment. Zara's heart raced as they descended toward the surface. "Ready?" she asked, her voice tight. Max gave her a determined look. "Let's do this." They landed outside the base, hidden behind a cliff where the shadows would cover them. As they disembarked, Zira's eyes scanned the surroundings. It was quiet, too quiet. The calm before the storm, she thought. The base was heavily fortified. They had the advantage of surprise. Max followed her as they crept toward the entrance. using the cover of darkness to stay hidden. They reached the door, and with a few precise commands from Zira, it slid open. They were in. The interior of the base was just as oppressive as the outside. Bright, sterile lighting illuminated long hallways, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. Zira and Max moved quickly, avoiding the guards and security cameras. They had one goal: to reach the central command center and expose the faction's operations. As they navigated through the base, they encountered a few mercenaries. But each time, Zira and Max were able to outsmart them, using their wits and the environment to their advantage. It was risky, but they were determined to succeed. Finally, they reached the command center. Zira's heart pounded as she approached the door. This was it. It's the moment that would decide everything. With a deep breath, she pressed the button to open it. Inside, they found the leaders of the rogue faction, standing in front of a massive screen that displayed the galaxy's systems. The moment they saw Zira and Max, their faces twisted in anger and disbelief. "You should have stayed out of this, Zira," one of the leaders said, his voice cold. "You never understood what we were trying to accomplish?" Zira stood tall, her voice unwavering. "I understand perfectly. You wanted control, and you used the disease as a weapon. But it ends now." Max stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. The battle wasn't over yet, but they had one advantage they knew: the truth. And the truth was powerful.